So when you say like the bandwidth is taken up by the current system, do you think that like the collapse of the current system will involve like people losing like internet, smartphones, all these devices? Because I frequently in my own life find that these things tune me out of what I would prefer to be exploring intellectually or just within my own life. You know, they're a very good waste of time for exploring ideas that would potentially lead to these sorts of realizations. Do you see this system collapses like everything like is going like no more Instagram, no more Reddit, no more Pornhub, like all the things that waste the most time for people, like no more fucking Twitter, like where are we going to get our meme, no more memes, like how what do you think is going to be removed that is taking up the bandwidth?
That's a very good question. No, I don't think social media and memes are going away. No, I don't think smartphones and technology is going away. I believe they are going to continue more deeply embedding themselves inside the structure of our reality. They may get better in a way, and I actually hold hope that um, right now it's very obvious what the algorithms are looking for, and they're looking for attention seconds, and they understand that outrage hitting your amygdala with a few sequences of words is the best way to keep your eyeballs on that screen. The answer is in the problem. The answer to that specific part of the problem is already evident when you illustrate the problem. We need algorithms that are more in line with what would actually empower us, not for one, outrage us, and for two, not what would just waste our time. But I think where technology and social media is at right now is at a point where it's showing how powerful it is, but it's also showing how disconnected it is from something that actually serves us. There are parts of it, parts of all of that infrastructure that does serve us, and that's why it's not going away. It's obviously going to stay. But what's going to crumble? What is the old empire that is dying? I believe much of the same infrastructure is going to stay in place. It's the story, it's the glue that holds it together. So if I wanted to make a movie called Avatar or a movie called Jurassic Park, much of the same infrastructure to execute on those two stories are exactly the same. A couple of the few bits and pieces and elements that go into it are going to be radically different. I think that's what we're facing in the near future is what's going to crumble. We're not going to be sent into Mad Max territory. I don't believe that's what the future is going to look like. I do believe there's going to be a hard correction in how much energy that we will be using in the next decade. That's informed mainly by Nate Hagens, who has the Great Simplification podcast. And whereas he has very specific ideas of what's coming, he's also open to it's probably not going to be this huge monstrous collapse, but even if you take a look at Americans using, I forget how much, maybe the average American uses 100 barrels of oil, and every barrel of oil accounts for a worker in the field for 5 years. That's how much one barrel of oil at work
What?
it actually gives you.
No fucking way.
That's, I mean, and so reference Nate Hagens for the specifics of how that's broken down. He's got a lot of resources behind him, but that's how incredible oil is. I forget exactly how many like joules or kilocalories that we need during the day, and we utilize 100,000 times more energy than we need to survive as an average American. And in other countries, this is different. So just imagine if you were to cut that by a third because of what's happening in Ukraine with that pipeline and the pipelines over here, or let's just say peak oil happened in the 70s and we've had diminishing returns ever since. All the low-hanging fruit and the most easily refinable oil has already been grabbed. Now we're talking about tar sands with far lower yield, and it's going to take a lot more money. We can't pay $100 for a barrel of oil anymore because it doesn't factor into the cost anything more than the extraction. It doesn't factor in refinement, shipping, the cleanup of pollution. It doesn't factor in any of those things. So I think a collapse doesn't need a collapse of what I'm talking about, the story, the glue that's holding together the way that we're driving into the future, as Marshall McLuhan said, using only our rear view mirrors. The collapse isn't going to come by a complete infrastructure collapse. It may just come by every American and everyone in the civilized world has to use at least 1/3 less energy. We're going to feel that. We're going to feel it in how much we can surf the internet. We're going to feel that in how much we can use our air conditioning, how much we can put the heat on in the winter, how we use heat. Are we going to start going back early 1900s? Still, the dominant way of heating your home was going and collecting wood and burning it. I could see a radical change just in that tiny sliver of the change coming. Most Americans needing to go harvest wood to burn in a wood oven, and most of their families hovering around this stove, not because they absolutely have to, it's the only way, but they want their TV. So they're not going to use oil to heat their home. They're going to use wood to heat their home because they also want to watch TV. Imagine the kind of world when we just have to cut back 1/3 in the amount of energy that we utilize. So if Nate Hagens is correct, a collapse doesn't have to mean Mad Max. It could just mean a massive reduction very swiftly, like within a decade, in the amount of consumption that can happen in the most developed nations.
Isn't that what the current system wants us to do?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, isn't that like we're being told by COP27 and, you know, the Bilderberg Group and Davos that we're going to need to cut our energy supply massively. My feeling was always that meant us, the average person, and never the people burning all the fuels. But like, isn't what you're describing, this collapse? Isn't that essentially what a lot of these people are kind of pushing us towards anyway?
Yeah. And I would like to hear a deeper question underneath that.
It's like right. So like if, and I want to get to your story, like where you think the story goes. But like my first question is like, is the future you're presenting to us as the collapse of the system not equally possibly being engineered, encouraged, and then with the possibility for that to be then controlled by the people who are collapsing the system? You know, it's like I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yes, it's being contrived.
Yeah, it's like
definitely being contrived by individuals in the World Economic Forum, by top executives at BlackRock.
Yeah.
It's definitely being contrived. However, the caveat to this, and just so we're clear, the story that I think we're moving into is not utopia. I'm not saying once we get past this one hurdle, we could just sit back and sip our Mai Tais. No, what I'm talking about is the story continues. The problems change. The way we engage with new problems, there's an element of the old, but there's a brand new orientation that community is going to need to band together to really solve problems at a local level, because infrastructure in some small part has either broken down or shifted its priority. Its priority is not all the red areas. It's just the blue cities, which have turned into smart grids, which is already happening. And I was talking about that in my first few films. The smart grid is real. It's coming. And that's a part of the contrived part of the story. I have to give it up for Mark Gaffney, because some of what I'm saying is really put in that one podcast. Just listen to that part 1 of the latest 3 podcasts on Aubrey Marcus podcast. It's a lot of big words, so it might get nauseating to some people, but The reason why I'm mentioning this is the it was mentioned in there, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Hmm.
And there are elements of what's happening as being contrived. And that does not mean there's two things that could mean, and also it's incomplete to say it's only one or the other. One is to say that BlackRock, World Economic Forum, Bilderberg, these elite groups are the only things in control of it, not the superorganism. Nothing's left to chance. It's all 100% a chess move done by these groups. I don't believe that's complete. I believe that, yes, it's being contrived by these groups, and what they have to do is hijack the banners that we fly our grassroots revolutions under. So let's say Black Lives Matter was a grassroots revolution, and then and I believe that it was co-opted from the start, but let's just say that it was a grassroots revolution and it had nothing but pure love and putting your foot down because of injustice. That's beautiful.
Hmm.
And then corporate and industrial processes come in and they hijack it and they turn it into something else.
Hmm.
So people are still wearing the same exact shirt, flying the same banners, but now it's not the same vehicle and it's not headed to the same destination anymore. That's definitely true, but it cannot be said, in my personal opinion, that the 1% or the they that we're talking about are in complete control. They are not the only ones with their hands on the steering wheel. And what's driving this story is something that, with their algorithms, with their supercomputers, with A/B testing through social media, and also trying to brainwash the masses through all this split testing and A/B testing on social media, they still don't have their hands squarely at, what is it, 10-2 on the steering wheel. There are unimaginable, not just amounts of hands, but kinds of influences that steer that steering wheel that even the 1% doesn't have full control over. They have more economic power, which in this story right now is your king. If you have massive economic power, you are king. You make rules at orders of magnitudes more influence than anybody else. That is true, but it's also incomplete. I'm less convinced that it's just the they causing this problem, but I don't ignore that exists. Do you see how that's how I include the old story and I transcend it rather than throwing the old story out and now I just live happily and ignorantly inside this new story that's being developed? I see that old story, but I know that if checkmate were right around the corner, I've been saying checkmate is right around the corner for well over a decade since I've been researching this. And I keep feeling like, this Ukraine thing, it's checkmate. And then something else will pop up. When COVID happened, that's checkmate. Then the Ukraine thing, checkmate. Oh, Kanye, checkmate. You know what I mean? Like there's all these things that happen, all these signs and wonders that happen that make us feel convinced that we know what's happening in its totality. I don't agree that any one of us know what's happening in its totality. I think we're authoring this story along with Klaus Schwab and the Bilderberg Group and with all those. We are authoring it as well. And we do have power in numbers. And there is a massive awakening to the bullshit that's coming out of these groups. I mean, think about it. World Economic Forum has been around since 1971.
Yeah, and I can finally say it to a lot of mainstream people without them looking at me like I'm insane.
It's been around since 1971. So
Yeah.
what we're actually dealing with is not people being proven that there is an agenda in play. It's people are now waking up to, I've always heard that there was an agenda in play, but I always gave the benefit of the doubt to the fact that there's no conspiracy. This could be explained in many other ways. I think we're moving into the next part of the story, whereas you can't move forward without realizing you've been lied to.
Mm.
You have to wake up to the fact that conspiracy is real. But how you do it and how you move forward with it is extremely important, because we're passing that baton on to future generations. I realized when I started making conspiracy films that people, again, they were leaving their family, they were running off into the woods, and I was like, what the fuck did I do? I didn't intend that, but because I made a film to empower people, now people are empowering themselves by leaving their families and making very rash decisions because I didn't understand my own power. I spent 6 months, I made one film, I reached millions of people, and some of them left their families and ran off into the woods and made massive financial decisions because of words that I put to a soundtrack with some visuals. That's how powerful one person, and I didn't even realize I was that powerful. I was just possessed. I need to fucking say this to people. That's how powerful one person is. And now we have the infrastructure, these fucking phones, this computer that I'm working on. We have the ability to, I had the ability to make a film in with under $2,000 with cracked software. You kidding me? That reached millions of people. We have more power than we know. We just haven't. I didn't even have to go and do a bunch of research to figure that out. What I needed to do was accept the fact that I had been lied to and know that how do I rise to that occasion rather than cowering from it? I need to wake other people up to it. Maybe not all people will wake up to it, but I must. That must is the same thing that you've heard anecdotal stories of moms who they're not benching 500 and squatting 680 at the gym daily, but their kid gets trapped under a car and they lift 3,000 pounds without their knees snapping or hurting their back. How the fuck did they do that without practice? It's because there's a different causal matrix than the Newtonian causal matrix in our mind. So the conspiratorial Klaus Schwab does this, now I'm experiencing this effect. Now I own nothing and it's his fault. That is real. But there's another causal matrix that we need to wake up to that will blow our fucking minds. And the hint of it is when a mother lifts a car off a baby and she doesn't go to the gym at all. She's actually sitting down holding a baby. That's how she trains for that day. And she has not more than a moment's notice. She sees it, she must. So she then recruits everything possible at her disposal and she lifts the fucking car. There's no explanation for that when you're just coming from the intellect. There's no explanation from it yet. And science may come to that point where it can explain it, but it shows you don't need an intellectual, scientific, sophisticated explanation to make something happen. That's what I think people are going, that's the positive part of the story that we're going to come face to face with. One, we've been lied to and it's still happening, and probably it's not going to go away anytime soon. However, we are going to rise to the occasion, and we don't know what that means, nor does the Klaus Schwabs of the world know how powerful that awakening is actually going to be. And this is why all the, when people say all those Q-tards that believed all the Q drops and stuff like that, I'm like, they're not completely retarded, because when they're talking about the Great Awakening, there is something coming. We know it in our bones. There's something coming. And there's a great reset. Oh, I know it in my bones. There's a fucking reset coming. Oh, there's a great simplification that's about to happen. I know it to be true. I don't know how to explain it. I can't point to external references to back it up, but I know it to be true. This is what I think is going to happen in the next decade, is many people are not going to need to fact check the shit in their head before they know it to be true. They're just going to engage with it like I knew people needed to hear what I had to say. So I made a film. I recruited everything at my disposal, cracked software, 6 months of my time. I quit my job and I made it happen. I didn't let anyone saying, oh, well, it's kind of unfeasible. How are you going to market it? How are you going to sell it? How are you going to distribute it? I didn't think of any of that shit. I didn't need to distract myself with it. So I know I got a little hot and heavy there explaining that, but that's actually what I'm excited about. What I see is happening is most people who are down the rabbit hole, to get back to our first part of the conversation, they get stuck down the rabbit hole looking at how fucked we are. And they don't use any of their bandwidth to look at how powerful we are. So they get hypnotized by how right they are that we are being lied to and we're fucked. And they've used none of their imagination to conjure what lives inside them that knows that they are also just as powerful as the problem, if not more powerful. So that's what's developing inside me as this new story comes to light.
Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.